Lilo and Stitch is a childhood classic about a small but dangerous alien named Stitch who flees from space and crash lands on Earth where he finds his new family with Lilo. However, Stitch kinda already has his own family. In fact, his other name is Experiment 626, meaning he has over 600 cousins, each with their own unique powers and ability. Today, we're going to be taking a look back at this series and covering every experiment and what made them special. But before we get started, this is a new channel, so if you could take a minute to leave a like and subscribe to help us kick things off, that would be massively helpful. You can also let us know any topic that you'd like to see us cover in the future down in the comments. But with that being said, let's get into things. Long ago, in the depths of space, Dr. Jumba Jukabi graduated from Evil Genius University with his lab partner Jacques von Hamsterville. The two worked together for nearly 25 years, with Hamsterville funding Jumba's many experiments, and it all started with Experiment Zero. Zero was originally a purple version of Stitch with all of his abilities. They were super strong, basically indestructible, they could think faster than a supercomputer, spit acid, walk on walls, and they're even fire and bulletproof. However, Zero was later turned into a black cyborg experiment with spider-like legs, a half-metal face, and mechanical arms which could transform into things like lasers, harpoons, and even a welding torch. Basically, he is the evil, worst timeline version of Stitch. As you might have picked up from how this experiment looks though, this is an early test and was more in line with Jumba figuring out what he was capable of. In fact, all of the experiments between 0 and 99 are either considered to be in his test batch or just made to be simple household helpers. On the more cute side, we have Shrink. This was the first experiment Hamsterville actually funded, and it has the power to either shrink or enlarge anything. That's a pretty strong power, but not all experiments have these amazing abilities. For example, Experiment 002, Double Dip, was designed to take foods, lick them, and then put them back in the bowl. He literally double dips things. This might be the most evil experiment out there, way worse than Zero in my opinion. But regardless, Double Dip found his home among Miss Hasegawa's cats. This was a group of 15 experiments who all live or work with this old woman. But that leads us to Experiment 003. How come? And this is going to be a very common theme in this series. So, as it turns out, Lilo and Stitch as a franchise hasn't had a ton of episodes or movies to work with. And as a result, many experiments just haven't been shown yet. We know their names and their numbers, but beyond that, we basically have 449, which really don't have any information about them at all. And all of these will have been scrolling on screen now, thanks to Mr. Editor. Along with those experiments that we have no information on, we also have 36 experiments which we have only seen in pod form. Again, all of those are going to be on screen now. But that brings us all the way to Experiment 007, Gigi. This one looks like a Shih Tzu and was designed to annoy people with constant barking. However, aside from that, she's pretty much just a normal dog. And because of that, she was given to Myrtle as a pet. Experiment 009, Pop, is an experiment whose tail was used to blow up balloons to the size of an entire room, so that he could pop them and disorient anyone who hears the loud sound that he creates. Experiment 10, Felix, is a small green creature with an elephant-like nose, which he can use to suck up any dirt or grime that he finds. He was originally created to sterilize, disinfect, and clean, but he often took things too far and assumed that everything and anyone in front of him was garbage or filth. Felix was then upgraded by Jumba to fix this issue, but he overcorrected things, and ultimately this resulted in Felix making things dirtier rather than cleaner. Next up, we have a personal favorite, Experiment 014, Colonel. This little dude looks flat out goofy. He has a bit of an opening on the top of his head meant to be used to make popcorn when Jumba watches movies, and he serves no other purpose. And I definitely prefer him to Experiment 020, Slick, a quick-talking salesman designed to keep talking until he makes a sale. While this would be a pretty sleazy experiment normally, Lilo finds him a home selling things for charity fundraisers, which turns this would-be annoyance into a genuine blessing for his community. Keeping on that theme of being annoying though, we have Experiment 021, Twang. He was designed to annoy those around him by playing folk music. Interestingly enough, Twang is one of the few experiments that we don't actually get to see, but who we do know about as his DNA was used to create experiment 145. On to one of the freakiest looking experiments, 022 Hertz Donut. This seahorse-looking guy was designed to restrain and immobilize others. He'll ask them if they've ever had a Hertz donut, and then shoot out a blast of energy which turns into a donut that wraps around them. Experiment 024 Hamlet is yet another of Miss Hasegawa's cats, though again, we don't get to see them in this episode. All we really know is that Pleakley asks, is that the one who can turn everything into ham? Which is a crazy ability. We did get to see Topper though, and this is 025. Topper is a star-shaped experiment designed to give off a bright light meant to imitate an invasion to the Galactic Armada. However, Lilo found a true place for Topper, who now serves as the local Christmas tree star and shines so bright that aliens can see him from several galaxies away. Next up, 029 Checkers. Checkers is one of the most powerful experiments, designed to make whoever wears it into a king or queen by hypnotizing anyone who looks at it. This ability doesn't work super well on other experiments, and it also won't affect the blind. On top of that, when Checkers is removed, its effects will wear off. Lilo eventually found a true place for Checkers, where he is being used as a decorative crown at festivals. Gotchu, Experiment 031, is an experiment with 4 arms and pincers for hands. He is currently living among Miss Hasegawa's cats. Experiment 032 Fibber is a lie detector. Whenever he hears a lie, the pattern on his head will light up and beep loudly. The bigger the lie, the louder he beeps. Following Fibber, we have Experiment 033 Hammerface, who, as you might imagine, has a hammerhead for a face. He was designed to hammer nails, though he sometimes hits other living things as well. Similarly, we have Pokey, Experiment 036, who's designed to poke holes and cause leaks with his spiked tail. And continuing on this construction-y theme, we have 040 Backhoe. Fitting to the mole-like design, Backhoe was designed to dig and destroy vegetation. But as we've seen, not all the experiments are exactly powerful, and that brings us to 044. Forehead. This is probably on the weaker side, as they have 4 heads, which are used to sing as a barbershop quartet, though admittedly they are very off-key. Even so, they still found their home as one of Miss Hasegawa's cats. Wait, where's Perry? Oh, wrong show, sorry. But we do have our own resident platypus in Experiment 047, Lowrider. But this one has an accordion body rather than a really cool hat, and was specifically designed to embarrass people by pulling down their pants. Meanwhile, Experiment 051 has a name that's a bit on the nose, Hawker. Hawker has acidic saliva that can eat through just about anything, which apparently made him perfect for joining in on Miss Hasegawa's cats. Who wouldn't want a pet that could melt through your floorboards after all? But an experiment that I would want as a pet is definitely 052, Coco. And Stitch must have been thinking the same thing, as he gave Coco to Lilo for her birthday. Coco's ability is to turn objects into chocolate, making him one of the sweetest experiments that Jumba ever made. And along those lines, we also have 054, Fudgy. Jumba must have been on a bit of a chocolate kick, because rather than turning things into chocolate like Coco did, Fudgy is actually just made of chocolate themselves. However, he is much less cute than you might think, as Jumba created Fudgy to drown people in that chocolate, which is terrifying, so let's just move on to Experiment 062, French Fry. French Fry is the only experiment that we know of to speak French, and was created to be Jumba's personal chef. With his spatula tail and extreme speed, French Fry can make just about any snack in an instant. However, he loved to make unhealthy food which made people fat until he eventually ate them. Luckily, he learned that healthy food can also taste good, so now he runs a low-fat French Fry hut. Alright, so French Fry was actually somehow scarier than Fudgy, literally fattening people up to eat them, but I promise 074 isn't like that at all. Meet Welko, an experiment who looks like a balloon animal with the power to create bubbles that are completely indestructible for a short period of time. See, that one was cute. Which is more than I can say for Experiment 077, Zop. Zop is another of Miss Hasegawa's cats, and was designed to annoy people by snoring as loudly as possible. Am I Experiment 077? Next up, we have Experiment 086, Clink. Clink is a crab-like experiment with a small prison cell inside of its chest. It is designed to capture enemies by splitting himself in half and rejoining around his target. On top of that, while he is separated, each half of himself can act independently and has their own mind. Skipping forward to experiment 089, Skip. This little guy has the incredible power to jump forward in time by 10 minutes. However, Jumba made a mistake while programming him, and as a result, he jumps 10 years instead of 10 minutes. That said, Skip also has a reset button that can send people back to their correct time as well. While Skip's power is incredibly cool, we unfortunately don't have much information on experiment 090, Fetch It, other than knowing that he is one of Miss Hasegawa's cats. And that wraps things up for the Zero series, bringing us into the 100s, which primarily focus on civic disturbances, which is wild considering half the experiments so far have been made specifically to annoy people in public. First up, we have experiment 102, Stop Go. Definitely one of the weirdest looking experiments so far. Stop Go has a very long neck that comes to a traffic light shaped head with green and red lights on it. He was designed to use these lights to cause traffic jams, however, he eventually used his power for good and now serves as just a normal traffic light. But right away, you can see the difference between the 0 and the 1 series. While many of these 0 experiments could be used to cause disruption, Stop Go is a perfect example of being specifically designed to stop how society functions. In this case, he is cutting off transportation, which causes a slew of other problems at the same time. But our next one, Stamen, who is experiment 103, is a little bit less direct. Stamen was designed to intercept and stop pollination by attracting bees and other insects to himself rather than letting them go to flowers. Without pollination, a massive food shortage would occur, while also wreaking havoc on the insects and animals who are actually able to survive in that area. It's a very underrated and devastatingly powerful experiment. 110 is Squeak, an experiment designed to annoy entire planets with his non-stop talking. As if constant talking wasn't annoying enough though, his voice can be made extremely high pitch and his mouth doubles as a megaphone. Also, fun fact, Squeak was designed to look like animator Frizz Frelling's character Sniffles from Merry Melodies, which is kind of fun. But that brings us to another wild design with 111, Mulch. This guy has a huge push lawnmower between his legs, which he uses to tear up the ground beneath him anywhere he goes. Mulch eventually found his home as Miss Hasegawa's 8th cat that we've covered so far. Another personal favorite is 112, Toons. Toons is a pretty interesting case, as their power has been changed and updated several times. Originally, he was designed to turn people into cartoons, but Hamsterville transmuted him and allowed him to transform into the subject of any drawing put into his mouth. Finally, he was ultimately reprogrammed to bring any 2D picture to life. But by spinning his collar, anything that Toons creates can be sent back to their original form. You could even use Toons to bring out the next experiment, Shoe. Shoe is experiment 113 and was designed to control luck. Specifically, Jumba made him to give people bad luck. However, by flipping the horseshoe on his head, this could be inverted to produce good luck. Shoe's true home was on a mini golf course where he helps people manage to get holes in one. On to experiment 119, Inverto, which is another strange case. Inverto was mislabeled by Hamsterville because his pod was upside down and thought to be experiment 611, which is a pretty big deal as we will get into later. Over to 120, we have Snafu, an experiment designed to ruin his enemy's plans by any means necessary. By extension, any plan to actually capture Snafu will always fail. However, Snafu can only actually undermine real plans, which means he can be stopped through luck or accidentally. From one of the most elusive experiments to one of the cutest, experiment 112, Dorkifier, can fire off a beam from his horns that cause the target to take on a lame or dorky appearance. Any clothes that Dorkifier puts on you can only be removed when his horns are turned off. Then we have experiment 123, Carmen. Carmen forces victims to dance until they drop by firing balls of energy from her maracas. However, this effect can be negated by clapping her maracas together. Also, much like French Fry spoke French, Carmen is fluent in Spanish. Much like Inverto, we also have experiment 124, Rhymer, who was also only mentioned because another experiment was mislabeled. In this case, it was Hammerface. The real Rhymer has very little known about him. But we do have info on 128, Bugby. This creepy little dude was designed to turn entire civilizations into insects. Unlike most other experiments, Bugby can't undo his own powers, and only Jumba's technology can. Bugby eventually found a home working on a farm where he transforms rocks into ladybugs so that they can help protect the crops from aphids. While Bugby is a horrific experiment that could ruin civilizations forever, our next topic, Experiment 133, or PJ, is a bit more on the silly side. He was designed to play practical jokes, and that's kinda it. He would have made a great 2010s YouTuber, but instead he found his calling working as an opening act for Moses' hula gig. Then we have Experiment 134, Shredder, and no, this isn't the Ninja Turtle villain, it's just an experiment with a paper chute on top of his head that leads to his razor-sharp teeth designed to shred important documents. And, of course, this is yet another of Miss Hasegawa's cats. Onto one of the scariest looking experiments, we have 145, Bragg. Originally, Bragg was designed to tell tall tales that would annoy anyone he came into contact with. Hamsterville eventually augmented him to tell sad stories instead and to act much cuter to earn sympathy. Bragg will even play a flute or harmonica to try and seem even more sympathetic and win people over. Along with this change to how he tells stories, Bragg was also changed from being this tiny green ogre-looking guy to this adorable little yellow bunny. And if that wasn't enough, he still retained enough strength to rival Stitch. Next, we have Experiment 148, which has to be one of the most specific abilities out of all of them. Weasel was specifically designed to run up planetary leaders' legs during public speeches and embarrass them. That's it. And while that might not be very impressive, our next two experiments, 149 and 150, are a pair which work together as partners in crime in a pretty awesome way. These are Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie is incredibly intelligent and is a skilled thief, while Clyde is extremely strong and has a robotic arm with a slew of different tools and weapons inside of it. With these, they can break into pretty much anywhere and rob them blind. So fittingly, Bonnie and Clyde's true home was prison. However, they were eventually released on parole. Then there's Experiment 151, Babyfire. This guy looks like a baby with a pacifier and has a rattle-shaped tail. Babyfire, as the name suggests, can turn people into babies by sprinkling powder on them from his rattle. To hear this, the victims need to drink a mix of 2 teaspoons of applesauce, 1 cup of milk, 3 mashed bananas, and a dollop of Kona coffee, though a specific flour could be used instead of the coffee. Babyfire's true home is at a dog shelter where he turns old dogs into puppies to give them a second chance at life and to make them more adoptable. Following the most adorable thing we have ever heard is Experiment 153, XYZ. While we don't see him, Pleakley mentions that he was created to unzip pants. We also have Finder, Experiment 158, who can track down or locate any missing person or item with his nose. He can also fly by spinning his ears like helicopter blades and honks like a party blower whenever he finds what he's looking for. Thanks to Finder, the beach's lost and found is now just the Found. As for Experiment 164, this is probably one of my favorite names among any experiments in the entire list. Lesdixia has the ability to make people unable to read by giving them dyslexia-like symptoms. Ironically, the next experiment also involves mixing up words. 177, Clip, was originally designed to consume Ubernium. This is the most powerful and economic fuel source in the known universe, and he was supposed to eat as much as possible to drive up the prices. Unfortunately, Ubernium is also the word for hair in Jumba's native language, and so Clip just eats hair instead. And when she eats hair, she will continue to grow in size. Luckily, she found a home at a hair salon. With that, we can jump all the way to 199, our last experiment in the 100 series, being Nosy. Nosy was designed to dig up embarrassing secrets, which could humiliate Jumba's enemies. However, a flaw in his program meant that he prefers to just look for gossip rather than anything that could actually help with military or political strategy. Following the 100 series is the 200s, with experiments focused on technology and science. With that in mind, it is kind of fitting that our first experiment is named Geinstein. He's 201, though unfortunately we don't know anything about him. We do, however, know about Jam. This is Experiment 202, and he is a completely rad-looking experiment with bat wings and a tail. He was designed to create high-pitched shrieks which could be used to jam radar signals or block radio waves. Then there's 204, No Socks. Have you ever lost a sock in the wash? Well, that is exactly what No Socks was made to do. This experiment even looks like a washing machine and was made to steal and hide socks. Moving on though to experiment 210, Retro. A small T-Rex looking little dude with the ability to reduce anything to its prehistoric state by wrapping his tongue around them. This transformation can be undone if Retro is spanked 3 times. Luckily, he found his true home working at a wildlife park, where he resurrects extinct animals for the Mesozoic Zoo. Pix, Experiment 214, is an experiment that was made to take bad pictures of people. He has 3 long tentacle-like legs which can be used as a tripod stand, and a camera on his nose which prints the photos he takes out of his mouth. However, these photos are distorted to make whoever is in them look freakish, kinda like funhouse mirrors. Next up, we have Experiment 220. Millie. This one has 10 arms, which he can extend for the express purpose of plugging air filters. Alright, so that one wasn't too impressive, but this next one, I promise, is shockingly cool. Sparky, Experiment 221, was designed to short-circuit technology and can turn himself into electricity, which allows him to fly and travel through anything electrical, like power lines, machines, or wall outlets. He can also create electrical currents between his antennae, which can be used to shock his enemies or to fire off powerful electric blasts. Sparky eventually found his home working at a lighthouse, which had been abandoned because it needed too much electricity to run. And you might have noticed that he is definitely one of the strongest experiments we've talked about so far. But 222 is nothing to sneeze at either. This is Poxy, and they were designed to infect planetary leaders with a virus that gives them purple pimples, smelly feet, and a swollen right eye. Just right eye, nothing to the left. It also makes them burp uncontrollably, which is supposed to be very embarrassing for them, and this will last until Poxy leaves that person's body. Experiment 223, Glitch, is kind of a mix of Sparky and Poxy. He was designed to turn technology against its user and essentially is a virus for anything electronic. His true place was inside a game console where Glitch could make the game more challenging and more enjoyable for its players. Now, do you remember Clip, the failed experiment who eats hair? Well, that problem was corrected with Experiment 225, Mashy. Mashy is a dinosaur-like little dude designed to crush indestructible gems of Ubernium. Again, this is in hopes of causing a fuel crisis so that prices go up. From dinosaurs to mammoths, meet Experiment 227, Butter. Butter is essentially a living battering ram, meant to charge through thick doors or barricades with its tusks and powerful head. But he isn't the only one meant for infiltrating strongholds. We also have 228, Melty. Melty is a tiny dragon designed to melt walls, weapons, vehicles, or anything else that opposes him by firing powerful blasts that can liquefy just about anything. With this ability, he found his true home melting metal at a recycling plant. While the last two were pretty powerful, Experiment 229, Kingpin, is definitely on the weaker side. Kingpin was specifically made to be a target in war games. However, he is unlucky, which can make him pretty difficult to actually hit. Outside of that, he doesn't really bring much to the table though, which is why we can jump up to 234 with Shush, an experiment with massive ears and a speaker on its tail, which allows him to easily eavesdrop on people's conversations. He found his true home working with Cobra Bubbles in the CIA. On to Belle, which is Experiment 248. Despite her adorable name, Belle was created to scare people by letting out a loud and high-pitched shriek. This made her perfect for being Nani's alarm clock. Another helpful experiment, though, is 249, Sproing. Sproing has a spring at the center of his torso, which was meant to allow him to bounce boulders and launch them at his enemies. However, he found a much more peaceful job where he extends his body to help people reach things in high places. But it's been a minute since we've talked about an experiment that was truly disruptive, so meet 251, Link. He was made to bind incompatible people together so that they would argue and cause chaos. He does this by releasing sticky goo from his antenna that is completely indestructible on 50 different planets. Unfortunately for him, Earth isn't one of them because it has mud, which makes his goo dissolve. He eventually found his home working at cliff diving for couples, where he teaches arguing couples to work together by binding their hands. Next up, we have Experiment 254, Mr. Stenchy. This adorable little guy was designed to be so cute that enemies would actually bring him back to their headquarters where he would release an awful smell that forced them to evacuate. Luckily, on Pleakley's home planet, this smell was considered to be very nice, so Mr. Stenchy went there to live because he would be appreciated. And looking almost identical to Mr. Stenchy is the following experiment, 255, Mrs. Sickly. As her name suggests, she can make people sick with the nauseatingly sweet smell that she gives off. If there is ever a situation where both Mr. Stenchy and Mrs. Sickly are together, the smells they give off will mix together and create a chemical reaction that will destroy the planet they are on. Good God, did that escalate quickly. So let's tone things down with experiment 258, Sample. Sample was designed to record random sounds and replay them endlessly to annoy people until they went nuts. He found his true place making background beats for a band called Fox Rosewell and the Tall Greys. But it's been a while since we've had a failed experiment, so let's talk about 262, Ace. While most experiments were designed to be some kind of evil, Jumba made a mistake creating Ace, and it resulted in him being made with no evil in his heart at all. Rather, Ace was purely good, but had a hero complex, eventually finding his true place working for the Association of Alien Rejects Reformed Geniuses, or ARRGH. Following the hero, we have Experiment 267, Wishy-Washy, an absolute unit of an experiment who was designed to grant wishes, though he will grant them literally, so if you wish for $1 million, he might give you a bunch of deer rather than the money. Wishy-Washy is also the first experiment to have limited uses. Once the bar on its stomach is depleted, he is completely powerless and will never be able to grant wishes again. As for Experiment 272, that is Wormhole. Wormhole was made to make portals into parallel universes and can understand just about any language so he can survive wherever he travels to. But you're probably asking, what could possibly follow an experiment that can jump between universes? Well, there we have Experiment 274, Alexander. And his purpose was to make long-distance phone calls that ran up your bill, which, equally impressive, though this is one that we unfortunately don't get to see physically. We do get to see Experiment 275, Tickle Tummy, which for some reason just scares me to look at. Tickle Tummy was designed to tickle her victims into submission with her long fingers. I knew I hated this thing the second I looked at it. But while Tickle Tummy looks terrifying, Remy looks like a friend. However, he is definitely not a friend. 276, Remy, was designed to infiltrate dreams and turn them into nightmares. And if you happen to wake up while he is in your dream, he will stay there forever, turning all of your future dreams into nightmares as well. Luckily, Jumba reprogrammed him to be harmless, and Remy now works to produce virtual reality experiences rather than creating nightmares, officially making him a friend again. And speaking of experiments who look like friends, we have 277, Snooty. Snooty was designed to mine and enrich snootonium, a rare but unstable energy source. Luckily, Earth has none of that, but that material is actually very similar to mucus, so Snooty found her home cleaning Victoria's sinuses, which is so gross. Quickly moving away from that, we have the experiment that I swear ruined my grades straight through high school. This is 285, Lax, and he was designed to make people lazy, lackadaisical, and unenthused by zapping them with his antenna. With this, he could cause workforces, companies, and even militaries to become completely unproductive and make them easier to invade. He found his true place working at an airport where he calms down angry tourists. Do you know what we haven't talked about for a while, though? Miss Hasegawa's cats. So, let's cover Boomer, Experiment 288. Boomer was designed to be a living boomerang, meaning that even if Miss Hasegawa loses him, at least she knows he'll always come back. And the last experiment in the technology and science set is 297, Short Stuff. Short Stuff sabotages mechanical devices, which he can short out to create chaos. He was eventually hit by an enlarging ray and found his true home working as an amusement park ride. Going into the 300s, we have the psychological experiments, starting with Experiment 300, Spooky. Spooky was designed to terrify entire populations into submission by transforming into their worst fears, including things like clowns, a headless Lilo, an asteroid, spiders, and of course, Jumba's ex-wife. Naturally, Spooky found his place scaring trick-or-treaters and haunting an abandoned house. Next up, we have an experiment called Amnesio, but I can't seem to remember what it does. Experiment 303 was created to erase people's memories by hitting them with a laser from his eyes. Luckily, Jumba programmed in a password to undo the effects, and Amnesio also carries the stolen memories in a pouch, which his victims can eat to restore everything that was taken. On to experiment 316, Morpholomew, who was designed to turn other people into an exact duplicate of anyone else after seeing the other person or a photo of them. That said, while the outward appearance will change, the voice will remain unaffected. Morpholomew found his home working at a costume store where he can turn people into celebrities. Experiment 319, Spike can shoot his quills into people to increase their silliness by 99%, leaving only 1% cleverness for the next 48 hours. Basically, he has the ability to turn people into idiots. Then there's Experiment 320, Cloudy. He was designed to depress people by making it rain constantly. And this is of course another of Miss Hasegawa's cats, although his rain is actually functional here as it helps her to grow fruits which she sells at her fruit stand. Now, unlike Cloudy, Experiment 322, Heckler, is not very useful. He was designed to insult and verbally abuse enemies to lower their morale, making him perfect for working at a dunk tank where he can provoke people into dunking him. You might not love Heckler, but Hunka Hunka will make you love someone. Experiment 323 was designed to bring societies to a standstill by inflicting lovesickness. Basically, when Hunka Hunka pecks you, you will fall in love with the first person that you see until you are sprayed in the face by water. 340 is the next in the line of experiments that we know about but haven't been able to actually see yet. No Deserto was designed to cause mass depression by stealing desserts. Truly, one of the most evil experiments of all. Following him is 344, Dupe, who was created to make infinite clones of any individual. However, due to a flaw in his programming, he will equally split that person's power amongst all of their clones rather than making perfect copies. Luckily, this effect can be reversed. As for Dupe himself, he found his true home duplicating shaved ice, resulting in a half-calorie version which is much healthier to eat. Dupe is followed by Experiment 345, Elastico. This clown-like little guy was made to distract his enemies with his elastic body, and naturally his true place was working at a circus. Then there is Slobber, Experiment 347. This experiment was only seen in Disney Adventure magazine, however we haven't actually seen what it is able to do yet. We then jump to number 355 with Swapper. Swapper was created to swap two individuals' minds, though it can transfer more than two people if it wants to. Manners, on the other hand, is Experiment 358 and is easily in my top 10 favorite experiment designs. Manners was designed to give people painfully perfect manners by waving dust over his enemies and forcing them to be too polite to fight back. He is yet another of Miss Hasegawa's cats. And speaking of acting overly sheepish, we have Experiment 360, Drowsy. Drowsy was designed to make people fall into near-permanent sleep with her voice. Only by spraying the victims' faces with water will they wake up, and naturally he found his true place being used to put insomniacs to sleep. At Experiment 375, we have Phantasmo. This green ghosty was made to take possession of inanimate objects and create chaos. Phantasmo is completely intangible and can pass through anything, making him pretty much uncatchable. Phantasmo's true place was being used to bring animatronics to life at Mackie McCaw's restaurant, presumably after leaving Freddy Fazbear's. Experiment 383 is Swirly. You might be thinking those eyes could look right into your soul, and you're just about right with that. Swirly can hypnotize people and force them to obey the next suggestion that they hear. However, the sound of snapping fingers will undo the effects. Swirly found his home hypnotizing people at children's parties, but we're also borrowing him for this video. Just look into his eyes and click that subscribe button. Anyways, slipping on to 390 is Slimy, an experiment meant to leave behind ooze that causes people to slide and fall. And lastly, for the 300 series, we have Experiment 397, Spats. Spats was designed to make people argue so angrily that they wouldn't notice their entire planet being conquered. However, if the victim counts to 10, the effect will wear away. Spats went on to work with Wizard Kelly to make his pro wrestling fights look more convincing. Now on to the 400s, where Jumba created a series of top secret experiments. And that's probably why we only know about 6 of them so far, with only having seen 2 of them. These tended to be for military purposes, though most experiments in this category are considered to be failed overall. Experiments 412, 413, 414, and 415 are experiments that we only learned about as Ruben searched through the experiment database. 412, Char, was designed to burn bagels. 413, Botulator, spoils food. 414, Krusty, spreads mold onto bread. And 415, Patter, eats a single sock from a pear. He does not really feel like he belongs with the rest of the group, but I guess he is still eating something, and that's kind of food related. We then jump over 40 experiments that we know nothing about, with the next one being 455, Mary. Mary was made to be a bouncer for Jumba's lab and literally bounced out unwanted guests by body checking them. And the last experiment in the 400s is Huggo. Huggo is an octopus-like experiment designed to use his tentacles to strangle and squeeze the life out of people. But that brings us to the 500s already, where very powerful experiments exist. Each of these is able to control some kind of element or their environment in some way. For example, first on this list we have 501 Yin and their partner Yang. Yin is yet another octopus, this time with the ability to spray blasts of water from her tentacles. While 502 Yang is a lizard designed to attack with balls of lava created from his back. Their one true place was using their powers together to create new islands. Team Magma would be proud. Then we have Plute, experiment 505. Plute was made to eat garbage and pollution. However, doing so makes him grow larger in size. Once he metabolizes the waste that he eats, his body will then convert it into toxic sludge, which he can use to cause environmental disasters. His true place is cleaning up litter and pollution at the beach. Woody, experiment 507, is a beaver-like experiment with mandibles designed to quickly eat wood. He found his true place as one of Mrs. Hasagawa's cats. Rather than eating trees, experiment 509 is a tree. Well, a plant, at least. Sprout was designed to grow into an uncontrollable forest that burrows underground and spreads its tendrils, eventually creating replicas of itself. Sprout found its true place, though, at the top of the Pineapple Water Tower. As for experiment 513, Richter, this is yet another of my favorite designs. Look at this little guy, what a goober. Anyways, Richter can find the weakest point in the ground and attack it to cause a massive earthquake that can be powerful enough to split the planet in half. So naturally, his place is being used to make milkshakes at the rental shack. Experiment 515 and Sprout's biggest rival is Deforestator. As you might imagine, he was designed to spin his razor-sharp claws to cut through and destroy forests. He can also spin these claws to allow himself to jump much higher or to move much faster. Then there is Splat, experiment 519. This guy is literally a road roller, and he was meant to level cities. He found his true place working construction, where he paves roads now. But there's more than one way to flatten a city. Let's take a look at experiment 520, Cannonball. Cannonball is naturally drawn to water and jumps into it to produce gigantic tsunamis, which he is able to control. This, however, made him pretty useful at the beach, where he can make waves for surfers. But we've had a lot of really terrifying experiments in this group. Let's slow things down a bit and talk about 521, Rapper. Rapper carries a roll of tape on his tail that he uses to mummify other people. Luckily, he found his place among Miss Hasagawa's cats. But we gotta jump right back into the dangerous ones with 523, Slushy. Slushy was designed to create ice and snow to freeze his victims. He can make blizzards and even mile-high snowdrifts. Of course, living in Hawaii allowed him to find his true place, making shave ice with dupe. Then we have experiment 529, Digger. As this little guy's name suggests, Digger uses his drill-like tail to dig holes, even being able to go through the entire planet. High C is experiment 513, and it's yet another that we got to see only in the Disney Adventure comic, and again, its abilities are unknown. But we do know about 533, Blowhard. Blowhard has an elephant head which he uses to blast wind at his opponents. This can be used to immobilize people by forcing them to float in the air like a kite. This, of course, did not stop him from becoming one of Mrs. Hasegawa's cats. This lady collects some of the most insane experiments like it's nothing. However, there is a more dangerous version of Blowhard, and that is Experiment 540, Foon. Like Blowhard, this one can control and generate wind. However, while Blowhard just immobilizes people, Foon was created to make typhoons. She eventually was mutated and could use her wind to fire projectiles at enemies, but even so, she still found her true place creating wind at the beach for windsurfers. Thresher, Experiment 544, was made to destroy plants and beat people up with his mace-like tentacles. Not exactly the friendliest experiment. And then we have Experiment 566, Derek. Derek was designed to drill potholes to disrupt traffic and damage vehicles, but more importantly, he is the 15th and final member of Miss Hasegawa's cat collection. Side note, I really like that some of the experiments just have, normal people names. I think that's very funny, kind of like when people name their cats, Greg or something. Anyways, lastly for the 500s, we have Tank. Tank is Experiment 586 and was designed to consume all kinds of metals and continue to grow exponentially as he does. That said, if he goes without eating metal for a while, he will revert back to his normal size. And finally, we have the 600s like Stitch. These are made for battlefield and doomsday purposes, and luckily, we know almost all of these. 600 is Whoops, a pretty goofy start to this very dangerous list. Whoops is a failed prototype of Stitch with all of the same powers, except he's very clumsy and breaks just about anything he touches. Even so, he found his true place on Pleakley's bowling team. Then there is Kix, Experiment 601. He was designed to bully his opponents with his kickboxing and wrestling skills. Luckily, he has stopped bullying people and actually started to teach kickboxing. He even hosts his own series of home workout videos. As for Experiment 602, this is Sinker. Sinker was designed to slice through entire naval fleets with his sharp dorsal fin. For now, though, he lives at a Japanese restaurant where he cuts up fish fillets and vegetables for sushi. Zap, Experiment 603, was not able to find a home, though. This experiment was designed to be a living laser that could crash through and destroy just about anything by flying at it at high speeds. Following Zap, we have Experiment 604, Houdini. As per his name, Houdini was designed to make armies and weapons disappear by turning them invisible. However, Houdini was afraid of gunfire, so on the battlefield he always ran away and turned himself invisible instead. He eventually found his home in Hollywood as a magician that makes sharks disappear. Another experiment that can make things disappear is 606, Holio. He was designed to act like a black hole that could consume and destroy entire galaxies. But he found a home working in construction where he sucks up debris and litter instead. Talk about not reaching your full potential. While we haven't seen Experiment 607, we do know that his name is Launch, and that he looks like Rufus from Kim Possible. As for his powers, Launch was designed to warp the fabric of space and time to cause the universe to collapse in on itself. Which is crazy. I knew Rufus was up to something. But that begs the question, how do we follow the experiment who could destroy the universe? Well, naturally, we have Experiment 608, Slugger, who swats away projectiles with his baseball bat tail. Cool, but lackluster after launch. Heat, on the other hand, is Experiment 609 and fires heat lasers from a bulb on his forehead. As for Experiment 610, Witch. She was designed to use supernatural powers to subdue and abduct planetary leaders. She can become intangible, bring inanimate objects to life, and just generally has a slew of reality warping abilities. She can even possess people and continue to use her powers from inside their body. That said, she can be forced out of a host if she sees her own reflection. Next is arguably the most dangerous experiment, which is crazy considering what we've had. Elfin, or Doomsday, is Experiment 611. Though we don't see him, Elfin was designed to make the universe implode when Jumba says a password. Luckily, Jumba, not the smartest guy, forgot the password, so there's no real threat. On to Yarp, Experiment 613. He was designed to make powerful sonic attacks that would deafen enemies and even flatten buildings. For now, though, he found his true place at Lilo's Hula School, where he acts as the buzzer and as an alarm to warn about possible alien invasions. Plasmoid is Experiment 617. This little scorpion dude can fire balls of plasma from his tail, which is actually pretty similar to Experiment 619 Splody Head, who can fire plasma blasts from the hole on his nose. That said, Splody Head did find his true place, lighting tiki torches for luau's. On to a super weird one, Experiment 621 Chop Suey, who is the villain of the Experiment 626 video game. He basically shares all of Stitch's abilities, but is less talented with them, and as a result, he became incredibly jealous. Chop Suey eventually was mutated to be way stronger, which he can activate by eating other powerful creatures' DNA. But after him is a fan favorite with Experiment 624, Angel. This was Stitch's love interest, who was designed to turn people and experiments evil by singing to them. She can also sing her songs backwards to reverse the effect. Angel eventually became an intergalactic idol who has fans all over the universe. But on to my own personal favorite experiment, 625 Reuben. Reuben is another failed prototype of Stitch containing all of the powers along with a full ability to speak fluently. However, a flaw in his program makes him incredibly lazy, resulting in him pretty much only wanting to make and eat sandwiches. And I just love the idea of this all-powerful goober being too lazy to take over the world. He, of course, found his true place as Gontu's partner and chef. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, Experiment 626, Stitch himself. Stitch has tons of abilities. He is fire, bullet, and shock-proof. He can lift 3,000 times his own weight. He is super fast, can crawl on walls, roll into a ball. He has electromagnetic, night, X-ray, and infrared vision. He can learn to play any instrument very quickly, speaks 20 languages, can drive any kind of vehicle innately, has an internal dictionary, thesaurus, encyclopedia, and experiment catalog, and can perfectly remember every moment of his life. And if all of that wasn't enough, he is pretty much indestructible, even being resistant to other experiments' abilities, though he isn't fully immune. Stitch can do just about anything, and of course, he found his true place at Lilo's side. The next two experiments don't actually have nicknames, just their experiment numbers. 627 was designed to be a better Stitch with extra powers from other experiments. On top of what Stitch can do, 627 can create plasma blasts, has Slushy's frost breath, Sparky's electrokinesis, Spike's spikes, Deforestator's claws, and a bunch of abilities from unknown experiments like breathing fire, creating diamonds, and making energy webs and illusions. His big weakness is that he has a very powerful sense of humor, which can make him laugh so hard that he loses control of himself and collapses. 627 was ultimately considered to be an experiment which could not be rehabilitated, and so he was dehydrated and put back into storage without ever finding a true place or being given a name. Now, we also know that after 627 was defeated, Jumba mentioned having better luck next time, showing Experiment 628's pod as he locked 627 away. And the final experiment in the core set is Experiment 629, Leroy. Hamsterville forced Jumba to create Leroy and basically make him an all-around improved Stitch that was even more destructive. Basically, he was stronger, faster, more durable, and just all around better. And if that wasn't enough, he came with an army of clones. Luckily, he was programmed with a failsafe that caused him to shut down when he heard the song Aloha Oe. Like 627, Leroy was deemed impossible to rehabilitate, with his one true place being prison. Now, while you might think those are all of the experiments, there are 3 unnumbered experiments as well. First is Trippy, a robot who was given to Lilo as a doll by Jumba. That said, we don't really know what she's able to do. Skunkuna, on the other hand, we do know about. He was designed to launch stinky balls that smelled completely disgusting. However, interestingly enough, when mixed with the smell from Mr. Stenchy, it actually freshens the air. And concluding this trio is Dark End. Dark End was created by Delia using genetic makeup similar to Stitch, giving him all of Stitch's powers. However, Dark End can also teleport, fly, create faults in the ground, and produce electricity. But with that, we have covered all 633 experiments in Lilo and Stitch. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content in the future. Remember, this is a new channel, so every bit of support helps a lot. With that said, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.